Hey, welcome to episode 2 of Two Fat Guys and an Album, the podcast where each week we take a deep dive into one of the classic albums. We look at the influence it had at the time, the reviews it got at the time, and how it affects us today. We'll also be talking about some new music we're listening to, what each of us is on our playlist, and then we'll wrap up with kind of a hidden gem. Some piece of music or an album that might have been overlooked or didn't receive the critical acclaim it should have. I am Mike Blackburn, your host and narrator, and with me, as always, is the maestro of music, the siren of sound, the doctor of the diminished chord. Yeah, you got a lot of titles. I forget them. Breck Huffness.
Greetings. The Doctor of the Diminished Chord is my favorite. You can't forget that one.
Yeah.
Because it's the one you understand the least.
Well, welcome, Maestro. Hey, episode 2, huh?
It is. Yeah, episode 2. Looking forward to it.
The first one's out there in the wild?
The first one's great. I encourage everybody, if you have not seen episode 1, I think it's a landmark in podcast broadcasting. I do have a couple things I want to clean up from it. We talked about The Clash.
Yeah.
Right? And, there were a couple little things in there. First of all, by the way, we have our new logo, which is awesome, our little screen and everything. I'm sure we'll have merch ready soon for that.
Sure.
But I thought I noticed a spelling error on the logo. Because we're two fat guys in an album, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and so we like fat, P-H-A-T, two fat guys in an album, like cool, two cool guys in an album, P-H-A-T, and it looked like it was spelled differently.
I think it was probably spelled accurately. I don't think we've quite proven the cool guy thing at this point. We have definitely proved the F version of it.
Yeah, okay, we can workshop that maybe
for
future episodes, but fine. Okay, and then so then the last episode, what was it? Post-punk had popped up. That's an alliteration.
Sure.
And I had challenged you on your genre knowledge.
You did.
And then I went back and researched it a bit, and I'd asked you to name some post-punk bands, and you just like, boom, kaboom. I forget what they were now, but it was the Talking Heads was one of them.
There was
and Susie and the
Banshees.
Susie and the Banshees. Yeah. And so, and I poo-pooed it.
You, as you always do.
I did. And I went back and I looked, and it turns out you were right, and I was. You were right.
So we've known each other for like 40 years, and he's never actually admitted he's wrong. So
I'm still not going to be honest with you.
Yeah.
But I thought, you've come up some very flattering titles for me, which I appreciate, and I'd like to do the same for you right now, because you have proven yourself to be knowledgeable about genre. So, when you come up with these titles, it usually has like rhymes and alliterations. Like I got the concept of how you work your magic here. So in honor of your extreme knowledge of genre, I've got some ideas. The king of categories. The Sultan of Styles. I like that. The Sultan of Styles. But really, I'm trying to work with genre, and genre doesn't, like, it's hard to rhyme genre, and it's got
like
that zh sound. So it's a little rougher, but I think I've got some good ideas. I just want to run them past you here. The genie of genre. Okay. The gerrymanderer, I can't even say that, of genre. The grand knight of genre. I like that one a lot, but it's still got a g sound and not a j sound. The genius of genre. the jerk of genre, and I'm just floating these by. I'm not, we can say yes or no on them.
Yeah, I would go with no.
Being a Chicago-based podcast, the Jardinera of genre could be something.
Makes no sense.
I know. Yeah. It's kind of a local reference. Okay, but then I thought maybe we could work rhymes in, because the j sound is tough. So I've got a couple ideas here.
Fire.
Okay. The Che Guevara of genre. It's got maybe an international, if we ever go international. I've got one more. I think this is the best one. The Anaconda of genre.
All right. Well, thank you for joining us today.
Okay. Well, again, we can workshop that.
Yeah, but anybody can leave a comment on that, and
but I will say, just to tie it up, while I acknowledge your genre-ness, I don't know. I'm still holding firm on my beliefs as well. So this is going to be a we're both right situation. We don't have to delve into it now.
All right. I'm really good with just being your host and narrator. We'll leave the maestro-ness to you.
Sultan of Style.
And we can just kind of set those on the side, and I'll be happy just being the host.
We could get you a turban.
All right. Let's just move on. So I was very pleased the way the first episode turned out, and I'm really having I'm having a lot of fun kind of digging into some of the music from the past.
Yes.
Some of the things that I followed in grade school and high school and college, and kind of looking back on some of this music, and it got me kind of going down the road of kind of where we kind of found our love for music, and where we sampled music from, where we got our music from. And every time this kind of think about this, it just irritates me completely about how mismanaged this whole thing was. Because in our day,
yes,
when we were in high school, college,
3 or 4 years ago,
the main kind of place to find new music, where everybody went to, and it was the topic of conversation in school, was MTV. Yes. MTV was it, right? That was what was on all the time. You look forward to like music video premieres.
Yes, it was a big deal.
And it was this amazing kind of change from the radio now to being able to see things, videos.
Right.
And then, I don't know. Now what's MTV? Now MTV is 24 hours of watching ridiculous's the show.
I don't know what's on MTV now. To be honest with you.
Correct. I mean, and it's just such a waste. And I've been irritated about this for a long time. And I think I figured it out. And I like your opinion. But I think they missed their demographics. They're still trying to chase the 14 through 22-year-olds that we were.
The age that we were when we liked it.
And that generation doesn't have anything to,
right. Well, they're just going to go on YouTube and find the song that they want to watch.
Yeah. And
you can still watch videos. I mean, videos still exist. There's just not a cable station devoted to them necessarily like there used to be.
Yeah, but the thing I think that MTV missed is they had an age group that was watching it. It was us.
Right.
I at 14 years old, I would sit there and watch Martha Quinn. At 50 whatever I am now, I would still be sitting there watching Martha Quinn.
A wonderful VJ.
Right. So I think they're missing the mark by not pandering to our age group. We still watch TV.
You're saying they could have grown with us.
They could have. Or at least recognized that they'd lost their audience and come back to us. I think you still have this vehicle out there.
Yes.
That we know right? I mean, I remember watching the MTV Music Awards. I remember watching, music premieres. I remember when Michael
And it
Jackson
mattered.
Thriller was coming out.
Yes.
We, everybody had to rush home from school to watch, the premiere of that video.
Right.
And I think I would still do that if MTV pandered to me, but I don't even know what's on there anymore. And it's definitely not music
and
videos.
I like VH1 as well because I like the pop-up videos. Do you remember this? When the bubbles, they would play a video and then little pop-up bubbles would come up and tell you little factoids about the song or the band.
I forgot about those.
Yeah, no, it's super cool. I really enjoyed that. Yeah.
Yeah. So anyways, MTV.
And sorry, if I can, just one more thing, like to give an idea of how important that was at the time, when Nirvana did their Unplugged, when Kurt Cobain did their Unplugged session.
Sure.
It changed music.
No, for sure.
That was, I think, the coming out party for grunge. It brought it to a larger audience. It literally changed the landscape of music. That's how powerful MTV was in the day.
And so at that point in time, MTV had to be 12, 14 years old at that point in time.
Probably. It was more mature. And you mentioned it, but Michael Jackson's Thriller was seen by millions and millions of people. And it was like, I want to say it was a 15 or 20-minute video. Like it wasn't just a song video, but they had created a little mini story around the entire song. That's how important these things were back in the day.
Unplugged was, I don't think we can talk about how big Unplugged was at the time, and you had Nirvana's Unplugged, which probably, you're right, changed music. That would be an interesting album to do.
No, it's definitely an album that's worth looking into. But there were multiple
Unplugged.
Unplugged.
But yeah, I'm trying to think of some. I think Neil Young had one, and
yes,
Eric Clapton.
That's the one I was going to say was Eric Clapton, and he came. I think Tears in Heaven came out. I mean,
so being the maestro of music, how hard is it for a typical like
to
rock and roll band
go down
to acoustic?
Well, I think for me the acoustic, I like it because you're stripping away a lot of the production, and so if a song is not a good song, or if you're not a good singer, you can cover that up with a lot of bells and whistles and production and fanciness, right? Mm-hmm. So when you pull all that away, you get what's left, and then it sort of reveals whether what's left is actually of quality, and so I don't think it's hard to do as a musician. Because your chord structures are usually the same, and you're not changing the song that much, but you are possibly changing the complete feel and mood of a song. As a performer, I think you have to re-envision the song and reimagine it.
Well, Clapton did that, right?
Yeah. So you're creating a new vision of a song, which can be difficult. Like
that's kind of where I was going.
Right. I mean, if you think you've got, hey, I've perfected this song. This is exactly what this song is supposed to sound like, but when you see a big part of a lot of live music is it's not the same as the album. So I think artists, depending on their skill level and ability level, are comfortable reworking their songs in different ways. But the thing I like most about the Unplugged format is it really reveals, if you just give someone a guitar and a microphone, do they still have heart? Do they have a soul? Do they sing this with meaning? It makes the lyrics pop. Is this song really a great song, or is it a great production?
Yeah, so that, I guess, two final points here, and we'll move on. But if you think about Clapton doing it, and he reworked Layla completely.
Yes. Which was an epic, monstrous song.
Correct, and became an epic, monstrous song again in the Unplugged version. That's the one that really kind of stands out to me. But that's re-envisioning the entire song. That had to take a long time.
Well, I think it gives it different meaning I wasn't there. I can't say. I think Eric Clapton's a very skilled musician
Sure.
and singer. So, I don't know if it was just a question of him taking out his guitar and playing through it 3 or 4 times to get it the way he wanted it. But he was definitely telling the story in a delicate, more way. It's a retelling of the story, and with possibly a different emotional impact.
But not every song, not every band can either want to kind of step down like that,
Right.
or can,
It
like
takes work. I don't want.
a pop band would be very hard to kind of.
That's what I'm
suddenly become
saying, because
acoustic.
maybe they're relying on production values
Yeah.
and
Okay.
electronic instruments to make their song interesting. But Layla was kind of a straightforward rock song. I think it strips down pretty easily. So it would depend. But I can say, I don't want to say it's super easy to do, because it is challenging, and I've actually been in that situation where it's like, how do you take this song and make it something different?
Mm-hmm.
And so there's definitely something to what you're asking about. I think it's different for every song and every band and every musician. But
Yeah. This is good. Anyway, so this is why the collapse of MTV just irritates me to no end.
collapse.
They're just a shell of what they were, and they had the world,
Yes.
and they let it go because I think they were chasing the wrong dragons. All right, but that's neither here nor there. Before we get into this week's album, do you have any final thoughts on our first episode, London Calling?
No,
The Clash?
it's a great album. Thinking back on it, I may have underestimated a little bit. There's so much to talk about in that album, and we just scratched the surface of it. So I would say, we could do an entire another episode on that album.
Yeah.
Also, I tried to find out how to pronounce the bass player's name, Paul Simonon, or Simonon, and to be honest, I got multiple. Nobody knows how to pronounce it, and I couldn't find him saying his name.
Yeah.
And so it remains a mystery.
Well, with my history in names, and anybody who is aware of me from other things will know that I am notorious for my ability to mispronounce even the easiest name.
Yes.
So it probably will not be the last name we mispronounce on this podcast.
Most likely. And if Paul's out there and would like to clarify those how to pronounce his name, I'm all ears.
We'll take his call.
Yeah.
I do. My final thoughts is I do think it's was probably overambitious for our first album, for the amount of time that we've given to talk about each of these albums. A double album probably requires a double episode.
Most likely, yeah.
So something for us to keep in mind in the future. I do have to say the one thing it did for me is it renewed my love for punk, and brought me back to the appreciation I had 40 years ago for this type of music. And it got me kind of searching around for, what's going on now and new music. And so this is not that part of the show, but I do want to bring up a band that I stumbled across in a song that I think is really good. The band, I would call them psychobilly.
Of course you do.
Yeah. So it's kind of that blend of punk and rockabilly.
Yes.
Yeah. So you might actually like the music, because that seems kind of up
I like a lot of music. As you know, I'm not chained down by genre.
You are not. You are a free flowing guy. So the band is called Divorce Finance, which I think is a fantastic name for a punk band. They're out of Leeds, and the song that they have just put out is called "You Can't Say Whore on the Radio." It is everything that you want in a punk song, and it's going on. It's brand new. So I would say, if you haven't heard of Divorce Finance, or you haven't listened to the song yet, again, it's called "You Can't Say Whore on the Radio." A lot of that good punk righteous hatred,
Mm-hmm.
that goes on. Um, and a lot of the protest stuff you get from punk, but it's all of like current things that are happening in Great Britain at the moment, and it's a great listen. So that'd be all I have to say. You're
Excellent.
you're still horrified by psychobilly, or no?
No, not at all.
Just combine like the Clash,
Psychotic and
the Clash with like
no,
Elvis,
yeah.
and you get
So
Elvis.
Psycho is reference to punk.
Yeah,
Okay. So it's not Punk Billy or Billy Punk.
it's psychobilly. It's good. Like
Gotcha.
it's got the boogie woogie feel to it.
All right, I'm going to check out
All
that
right,
too.
All right. So, with that, let's. We are going to begin talking about our album of the week. We'll jump into Moondance next.
Ladies and gentlemen, in the red corner, an album that needs no introduction. Ranked 120 by Rolling Stone magazine, but number one in your hearts. This timeless, triple platinum, poetic, soulful, Celtic, jazz pop masterpiece invites you to relax, reflect, and indulge in its intoxicating warmth. Created by a rock and roll Hall of Famer, he has 2 Grammy Awards and 40 albums in the UK Top 40. You know him as Van the Man and the Belfast Cowboy, Sir Ivan George Van Morrison. This is Moondance. And in the blue corner, 2 fat guys. This is 2 fat guys and an album.
Welcome back to Two Fat Guys and an Album. The album we are highlighting today is Moondance by Van Morrison, and this was your pick, so we're alternating picks here.
Yes, I chose this album.
So how we generally do this, or how we decided to do this, is we're going to first kind of talk a little bit about the artist, and then we're going to dive into the album.
Okay.
So tell me about a little bit about Van Morrison, and give me a background, kind of style and
yeah. Well,
history.
Van Morrison's one of my favorites. First of all, so born in Ireland, 1945.
Mm-hmm.
I think you always have to start with a birthday.
Sure.
For
Happy
some reason,
birthday.
and I don't know what day, but one of the days in 1945.
So happy birthday.
And he had commercial success in 1964 as a member of Them, singing Gloria. Them, by the way, kind of punkish to me if you go back and listen to it. Singing Gloria.
Yep.
So he wrote that song when he was only 18 years old. If you do the math from 1945 to 64, I know it's 19, but you know how birthdays aren't always in the same year. Well, like you'd have 6 months, so you could be 18 or 19 in a particular year. It's probably not important. There were actually 2 versions of this song.
Yep.
In the Billboard Top 100 in 1966, when he would have been older, 21, if we're just following that train of thought.
Yep.
The Them version was at 75, and The Shadows of the Night actually had the more popular version at number 10. In 67, he wrote one of his most popular songs, Brown Eyed Girl, and that was number 10 in the Billboard Top 100, triple platinum in the UK. So he's had some great success as a young artist. And his music described as Celtic soul. Now,
Oh boy.
this is not, I would not call this a genre, just a way of describing his music, because he's from Ireland, Northern Ireland to be specific. And he's a soulful singer. And
So Rolling Stones said about him, I think it's one of the great quotes, but they said, what one hears is not style but personality.
Yes.
So Van Morrison is one of the few acts that that I have a hard time kind of classifying.
That makes me happy.
He's kind of, well, I mean, he has a lot of that kind of Celtic charm, you know. He has kind of a lot of the folk singer stuff kind of going on, but it's much deeper, and there's a definite like spiritual root in what he does.
For sure.
And I think some of his albums are even more kind of that spiritual or religious kind of slant to them than others.
Right. And if you go deep, even the words that you used to describe Van Morrison, spiritual and enigmatic and mysterious and transcendental. Somebody put it really well, merging ancient mysticism with the primal energy of rhythm and blues and rock. And when you look at his influences, it's fascinating how he brings all of these influences from his father's record collection, I believe, is what he acknowledges his influences to be. And his father had just a super diverse record collection. So you're looking at soul, you're looking at Jelly Roll Morton, not Jelly Roll, by the way. Jelly Roll Morton, one of the early great jazz pianists.
Big fan of Jelly Roll. I think the Jelly Roll, but not. Go on.
Yeah. Ray Charles, Sam Cooke, Lead Belly, Bobby Blue, blues legends, soul legends, but somehow he took all this and made it his own and truly just synthesized all this information to become Van Morrison, who's really a singular performer, a unicorn.
Absolutely. I guess if we're going to talk about him as a person, he doesn't. What I was familiar with him, or what I'd always heard about him, is he was difficult. He was a hard guy to work with. He was a hard to get along with. Angry kind of guy.
I think that's commonly perceived.
But as I read an interview, I'm sure you're familiar with Cameron Crowe, who was
the director.
The director done a lot of. He did a lot of documentaries, like Pearl Jam's 20. He did, was the director of. He's done movies. I think he gets credited with Fast Times at Ridgemont High.
Okay.
But before all that, he was he did a lot of interviews for Rolling Stone, and he describes him much more sympathetically as it all comes from just being shy.
Sure, I would think. Yeah, I could see that.
Shy,
kind of introverted and
a perfectionist at the same time.
Yes.
So Cameron Crowe tells the story about when he was setting up to try and interview Van Morrison. It took a lot of negotiating, kind of third-party negotiation, to get him to even agree to do this interview. And then he was told when he was about to sit down for the interview that Van Morrison could bolt at any time, would get up and leave.
I can't say it. Mercurial personality.
Yeah, you can feel free to leave a comment on that. They met in a diner and had this kind of conversation that led to this lengthy interview in Rolling Stone in 1977, I believe, and said it was kind of a tense. Van Morrison didn't seem very comfortable until his music started playing on the overhead.
Right.
Just the whatever they would call it in 1977, but it came on the radio, if you would, and it was being played through the diner. Once he heard his own music, he relaxed a lot and kind of got bubbly, like,
sure.
Look at me, I made it. I'm,
yes.
They're playing me in the diner, It was kind of cool, but I became much more sympathetic to the fact that maybe he isn't this angry guy.
I think a lot of humans probably are like that. But certainly he has a reputation for being off-putting and probably is a super nice guy.
But wasn't there a kind of another kind of live performance he did where he really?
Well, like one of the songs. Well, first of all, Moondance from the album of the same name, came out in 1977. It was one of the singles, even though the album goes back to 70, they didn't release Moondance as a single until 1977. And it blew up. So I wonder if that had anything to do with this particular interview, and if that might have even been the song that he heard on the radio. One of my favorite songs from the album is Caravan.
Yep.
And the Caravan song on the album is wonderful. There are many great songs on the album. But in this case, he's performing at the band's last waltz.
Oh, yeah.
And it's on which is, again, one of the great documentaries in music history. It features many performers, many guest performers, but it was the band's final show. Yeah. And Van Morrison performed on that, and one of the songs, he performed 2 songs. One of them was Caravan, and that's probably why this is one of my favorite songs, because it was one of the greatest performances in music history, I think. You're watching somebody just have an out-of-body experience on stage. If you've seen it before, I mean, you can YouTube it very easily. Go watch it again, because it's great to see.
That whole documentary.
That whole documentary is fantastic. And if you've never seen it, it's worth a watch, because it's truly just as energetic, taking over the entire show, drop the mic performance.
It is. And you what makes that remarkable is all of the names that were in that show.
Yes.
I mean, it's not like he's just simply blew away, a guest spot with the band.
No, there's probably 20 guest artists on the band on that show, and all of them performing wonderfully. It's all the performances are terrific, but Van Morrison dropped the mic that day.
I totally agree. So let's dig into the album itself. So I guess I will preface this by I'll let you talk about the album and tell me why you picked this and what makes this album special to you. I love songs on this album. I love Moondance. I think the first side of this LP is phenomenal. Into the Mystic is probably one of my favorite songs.
Yeah, terrific song.
I do think this album as a whole is not his best album. I would also say that this album to me is like one step above, background music at a cocktail party.
Wow, that's super harsh.
But it's good, just kind of background listening music. Which is a shame, because I think other albums by him where he is lyrically driven. This, he's a poet first and foremost in my mind.
He's got a award for like the Songwriter Hall of Fame.
Yeah, so I think that's a lot of this. But to me, this album it has some fun songs on it. Moondance, I like Moondance. I like I said, Into the Mystic, I think is a great song. But I think just musically, it's just kind of it's there.
Yeah, I don't. It's hard to respond to in that way because I have a different opinion.
Yeah, so
and I do think, and for everybody listening to the show, I respect your opinion, no matter how wrong it is, and but truly, albums hit us all different ways. Mm-hmm. We all have personal relationships to these albums. Depending, who knows why. It's one of the fascinating things about music. Like, why does this hit me different? And it could just be, what were you doing when you first heard this album, or what element in your life do you attach?
We
to
were
this?
learning to walk. In this
but that's not when I first heard it. I don't think, because I had a lot of country music playing in my house. I don't think Van Morrison was being played when I was learning to walk. Yeah. So I came to it a bit later. So I like the album and see it much differently than you. It's been called a jazz soul masterpiece. I believe it's a masterpiece of an album. A lot of critics look at Astral Weeks, which predated this one, as maybe being his greatest album, and that's also a great album, but it has a lot of extended solos on it. It's a little more jazzy. It's a little more jam bandy.
Sure.
But also has this spiritual nature to it.
But lyrically, that album, you need to listen to that more.
Well,
I mean, that's a listen to album. This is a background.
Yeah,
album.
but you're wrong. And I would, first of all, I'm not disparaging Astral Weeks.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we're just talking about levels of greatness here in my mind. Astral Weeks has so much instrumental music on it that is no lyrics, that what you just said makes zero sense to me. So if you were going to put an album on in the background, Astral Weeks is instrumental. That'd be a fabulous background music. But I will tell you that.
Did I hit a nerve?
Well, for me personally, yeah. Mine like let's just go. Let's do this right now. I can tell you that just the idea of background music, I have trouble with. And I don't have it's not that put music on in the background and do some work. Like, I think that's common for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's not what I'm saying. But for myself, I find myself drawn to listen to everything. So in my own mind, I don't experience background music so much. If there's music playing, for me, my attention's drawn to it, and I can't multitask that.
You must have a hard time driving.
Well, I'm not thinking about driving. I'm thinking about the music. So
explains a lot.
Yeah.
Go on.
Just in general, I'm not saying, it's just a generality.
Mm-hmm.
I don't. Background music doesn't often work for me. As my attention, I think about the music that I'm listening to. Moondance, I think, has wonderfully poetic songs. I like Moondance because it sort of condenses some of that expansiveness of Astral Weeks into a little bit of a tighter setting. It still has the jazz style. It still has the improvisational parts, the instrumental parts. I think the poetry is fantastic. But even if you look at the title track, I mean, it's definitely a jazzy sound. It definitely works as a softer pop sound, which he's somewhat credited with creating. Like the FM radio idea, the album rock, the adult contemporary sound, things that honestly I found not interesting when I was younger. And if I can expand, like that 70s rock did seem a little backgroundy and
music
a little bit.
Elevator music.
Yeah, but I think elevator music is far more disgusting than what you're just talking about.
No,
so
but,
I would.
But nobody would be surprised hearing Moondance playing as you're shopping at a grocery store today.
Yeah, but that doesn't make it bad music.
I didn't say it was bad music.
I think you implied it.
No. Into the Mystic is one of my all-time favorite songs.
But you wouldn't want to shop to
it. No, I'd be happy to hear it. I'm just saying that this album to me is where there's a couple, Caravan.
Killer performance.
Yeah. But Moondance and Into the Mystic, and they're good, but it's all just kind of.
No, it's. I think, I would invite.
It doesn't have the same lyrical or spiritual or even musically as deep as some of his other albums.
Yeah, I mean it's. Okay, so I mean, if you go song by track quickly, And It's Stone opens it up.
Yep.
I think it's a great song.
It is solid start.
Okay. Moondance
speaks for itself.
And it is jazzy, and it has like sort of a light jazz. Like I can't deny that, but also that doesn't make it bad.
I never said it was bad.
You said it was worse than other albums.
Worse than other of his albums, yeah.
Okay.
So
I could jump, like I would think of a band like the Eagles as someone who maybe I didn't take seriously at one point, or James Taylor as someone I didn't take seriously at one point, because they had that sort of softer feel to it, and when I was younger, maybe I wanted to be a little more punk.
So
or something.
I'm not trying to compare Van Morrison to Bread or anything.
Okay, I appreciate that.
It-
Crazy Love is a super tender, heartfelt ballad. I mean, I feel like his music goes directly through me. You know, it bypasses any intellectual. And this is my emotional response to the song.
I think you're saying the exact same thing I'm saying. It goes right through you, and you can.
No, not like
you can
beans.
continue your
not
cocktail
like a
party.
burrito. No, and there is no explanation for it. There really isn't. But I can say that this specific album, these specific songs, when I first heard them, grabbed me in a way that musically, lyrically, his way of singing, his way of delivering music, grabbed my attention in a way that very few other bands, performers, albums have. And it's beyond even just song by song. Is this a great song? It's the complete package.
So after Crazy Love, you have
Into the
Caravan,
Mystic is awesome.
You have Caravan, Into the
Right,
Mystic,
and I
that's
think
the
you
first
said
album.
it's the first side, right? So you have those songs, Anna Stomey, Moondance, Crazy Love, Caravan, Into the Mystic. That's your first side of the album.
So
Phenomenal.
No.
Phenomenal.
Absolutely.
Okay.
So if I was having a cocktail party, I would put on this side of the album and loop it. It's really good.
That's fine.
You know, so to me, this has always kind of been. I do like a few songs on the back side, but it's really a one side album.
I think this is the album. You know, we're in the era of album rock, also.
Yeah.
And you know, it's a little different than today when you just pick out a couple songs, and you like them, and things get released as singles. So this was released as an entirety, as intended to be an album of music. You can certainly like some songs better than others. That makes sense. But, you know, if you just had the second side of this album without the first, it may not be as impactful, but I think it would still stand on its own. These Dreams of You, Brand New Day is as good as any of the songs on the front side. But I do agree that the front side is the heavyweight part of the disc.
And people younger than us may be aware of this album from a song on the B side of this album,
Right?
Which is
Glad Tidings. Yes.
Which was it was featured in the final episode of season 5 of The Sopranos.
Yes.
Where Tony shoots Tony B.
Yes.
It's a phenomenal scene. Tony B was played by Steve Buscemi.
Yes.
Yeah, and
great ironic use of the song.
Absolutely. But it's so that's where I think other people may be familiar with it, and where a song from the second side of side 2 of this LP made an impact.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, for me, the whole album made an impact. I think it stands as an entire album.
All right. So the first episode we talked about great albums, perfect albums.
Yes.
I guess before we go there, I'm just curious. Do you have a favorite song?
Well, Caravan is the one that jumps out, but because of specifically the
band performance,
like that just elevated that song into Into the Mystic. Probably is also my favorite song.
1A.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
Into the Mystic, I think, is far and away. Moondance is the one I'm most familiar with, or was first familiar with.
Yes.
The Moondance, the title track itself.
Well, and if I may, like, I think that was probably the one that I heard first as well, because I think it was released as a single when we were a little bit older.
Yeah.
And that might have been my first exposure to Van Morrison.
Probably
was through that song. And to hear something just in that style of a jazzy, like a song that's really a jazz rock song that had crossed over,
Yeah.
Maybe now it seems like elevator music to you, but to me it was a kind of a crossover and kind of an eye opener, and maybe even a bridge to that style of music.
Yeah. So we talk about great albums, and I kind of said I have two categories I keep albums in, and it's either the great albums, so those albums that were historically super significant or change music, and then I have the perfect album, the no skip kind of albums.
Right.
This would be for me on the lower end of the great album scale, but truly has enough music in it and had enough performances that it makes it you can't ignore this album. It's significant enough to we
fair.
should talk about it on a podcast maybe.
Very good. It's a fair assessment.
It's not a perfect album.
Yeah, for me, and so I would like to even refine your perfect album concept. I think there could be subcategories of a perfect album, perhaps.
Now you're going to subcategories.
Yeah. Well, I like the idea. Like, I think the idea of a perfect album, and how did you define that again?
No skips.
No skips. You listen to the album straight through, flip it over to side 2 if back in the day.
Yep.
All right. Yeah. So let me just say, if you're listening to it on CD, where you don't actually have to flip it over, would you venture into the second side of the album, or would you just turn it off after?
Well, so in that case, you're skipping songs. So I mean, if I had this song on or this album on and was listening to it,
you would skip a song.
I would go through the whole, first side through Into the Mystic. I'd probably skip. The first.
You'll come
songs.
running to me, or These Dreams of You. So you have you have a perfect album, no skips. Okay, but you could have a really good, like, how many albums in the universe have? Sorry, I'm gonna have to count this up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I'm gonna include Brand New Day in that, and then 7, Glad Tidings, because it has new context.
Yeah.
Okay, so on this album, I believe out of 10 tracks, it has 7 winners that we can agree on.
Well, absolutely.
Okay, so not a perfect album.
No, it's a solid album.
Right.
I just think musically it isn't as interesting as some of his other work, and lyrically it's not as interesting as some of his other work.
You're entitled to your opinion. So even if you don't declare it a perfect album, it's still a 7-track album worth talking about. Yeah. So I think that needs to have a title. Like, there needs to be a name for it. It's not quite perfect, but oh my God, it has 7 amazing tracks that most of us agree on. And so, but not for me, it's not a no skip album.
So like the Breck album, a Breck album?
No, I don't think that's I don't think that's it.
So I don't calling it good enough?
We're not.
No.
You're going to keep working on it, Sultan.
So I would say it falls closer into the great album category because it has
historical significance and all that, for sure. But then it has. So then I have another way of looking at it, which I'm going to just let the Sultan of Styles work out the wording here. So for me, it's a no skip album. Okay, but it's beyond that. Okay, so not only is it a perfect album. But it's an album that once you have the technology of building playlists and things like that, and I know you have playlists that probably have 3 songs in them for each genre that you like.
Yeah.
But I actually, my favorites, literally, it's 4,000 songs, 4,500 songs in my favorite list, and these are all songs that I think. So it's an inclusive playlist, I admit, but I would have all 10 of the songs on this album would be favorites. Okay, they're not. It's not just a perfect no skip album, but every song in this album goes into the favorites. And there aren't a lot of albums like that. Even in my very liberal 4,500 playlist, there are very, very, very few albums that have every song in it. So to me, that's a perfect plus album. Where every song is not just, I'm not going to skip over this, but I'm actively want to hear this song when it comes around. So I think this album, for me, better than perfect in that every song is a favorite.
But not every song is a favorite.
There's some songs are better than others, just like you have children, and some of them are your, they're all your favorite, but some are more favorite.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I do think.
We'll have to revisit that.
No, I do like the idea of what you've set forth as perfect and historical. I think those are, and this album for sure is a super influential historic album. It's a game changer of an album. Van Morrison has had influences that have trickled to this very day.
Sure.
So it has that gravitas of being an important album from a historical standpoint.
And yet we've never gone and seen him.
Well, that goes back to what you were saying before, where he can be a little mercurial. No, I said it. Mercurial. Yeah, because concert tickets aren't cheap. And so I would love to see him because he's one of my favorite performers. But I also know he has a history of not showing up at events or coming on an hour late or playing songs that he wants to play and not necessarily songs that the audience wants to hear. So all of those things put together make me less inclined to, put down some money and set aside a day to go see him when I'm not sure what I'm going to see. But if I knew that I was going to see Caravan from the last waltz, I would pay double for that.
Well, that's awesome. I think we're going to have to leave this one here and move on to the next part of our show.
Hey, two fat guys and an album fans. This is Diane Blackburn, realtor with Baird & Warner and proud sponsor of this podcast. I pride myself in being committed to serve as a trusted real estate advisor for all my clients. Whether you're looking to sell, buy, rent, or lease, feel free to reach out and let's chat about how we can work together to make it happen. If you're watching, scan the QR code for my website or give me a call at 630-638-1999. See you on the flip side.
Are you someone who needs help with their Instagram or TikTok? Well, you're in luck. LR Media is here to help. Email me at laurarose2003@aol.com to get started. Let's make your social media shine.
Right, so in this part of Two Fat Guys and an Album, we kind of discuss what we're listening to. We're going through some new music, maybe some shows that are going on that are worth having a conversation about. I was, so as we approached, when we got through the end of the year and into this new year, I was looking back on like some rankings of some of the top albums of the year and kind of reading through those and seeing if there's anything kind of noteworthy. And one of the albums that kept coming up over and over as like one of the best albums of the year was an album that's called The Bed I Made by a band called the Softies.
Okay.
And the review from All Music was, it should make old fans very happy while giving anyone lucky enough to come across the record a chance to discover one of the best bands to come out of indie rock scene of the 90s is now one of the best bands of 2020s too. Rolling Stone called it an emotional tour de force full of intimate, hushed, exquisite, delicate, heartbreaking music. I was very excited when I saw this. I'll admit I didn't know a whole lot about the Softies.
Right. But based on the reviews, you were psyched.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of checked the boxes, the music that we go to see nowadays, the kind of indie rock scene.
Yes.
I was looking forward to like a female version of maybe Dawes or something.
Okay.
For all of those Dawes fans out there. This was...
It was not that?
This was horrible.
Oh, no. No. Okay. Oh, really? Well, okay, wait a second. And pardon me.
No.
Are you actually putting it in the horrible category? So this is... And no, just letting you know because little production note, like little production meeting let you into the inner workings of the Two Fat Guys show. So you tell me to listen to this album, knowing that it's horrible.
So, well, it was so highly regarded by kind of every list you had of best albums of last year.
Right.
This was on it.
Yeah.
And I don't get it. I mean, this is, to me, this is like music you would play. It was very repetitive.
Yes.
The harmonies were, it's two women. The harmonies were beautiful.
At times.
Yeah. But it really came across as like music you would play.
In an elevator.
No, worse. Like the, like a
torture chamber.
A lost dog montage in a film. You know, where
I think
people are out
I think that would be great. I think if they could monetize it in that way, God bless them.
So I don't get, and I love the indie music scene.
Yes.
I love, harmonies, to go way back in the day, I was expecting like Simon and Garfunkel or
which I heard
the Milk Carton Kids or
that's a high standard as well.
And I didn't get any of that.
Yeah,
so
I think
I'm as the maestro of music.
Yeah.
I am fascinated for you to explain to me how this album got on everybody's kind of top 10 list of albums from last year.
That's why we have a podcast, because we evaluate music better than other people. Yes. I think it's an interesting group. Like once you and you didn't tell me how horrible you thought they were when you first listened. I thought, when you recommend an album, I thought it was me. Hey, I like this album. What do you think? So I was going into it with that, mindset, and I was like, why does he like this album? They're very pleasant to listen to.
Yeah.
They did make me think that the first thing I literally thought was, this is what the Shags might sound like if they could sing and play their instruments. And I did hear.
It's gonna take me a minute to get over that.
I did hear Simon and Garfunkel in there for sure.
Yeah.
I do think, like, I listened to it and I said, there's a little Simon and Garfunkel in there.
If they were really sad.
So do you know, as the maestro, no, that's me, as the Sultan of Styles and the anaconda of genre, they are known as twee pop. That is I didn't make that up, twee pop. And it does describe the music as sort of childlike and simple and almost childish voices. Like their singing is light and airy and mostly very pleasant. And the guitars, it's all stripped down, kind of minimalist. But this, if I can diverge into the genre thing again, like I listened to him and what I thought was like, this sounds a lot like the music from Juno. And that was dominated by the Moldy Peaches and Kimya Dawson and Belle and Sebastian. And it had that same vibe to me, that same simple, childish quality to the singing that I quite like, actually. I love the soundtrack to Juno.
Again, Rolling Stone called this an emotional tour de force.
Yeah, it's not. So I listened to the whole album, and then I listened to it again to see what I was missing. But when it went through my playlist, you know how it automatically starts up a song? It started up a song called Cast Away the Clouds by Rose Melburg. Rose Melburg is one half of the Softies.
Yeah.
This song is the one that they were talking about. This one, to me, was the emotional tour de force. It was in the exact style.
What's the song called?
It's called Cast Away the Clouds, but it's from 2006. It's an older song. It's not a new song. But if this entire album sounded like that, and for me, what's the difference? Like, this song grabbed my attention instantly, and stylistically, it's really the same as the Softies, but this song had immediate emotional impact to me.
Yeah.
So I recommend Rose Melburg as a solo artist, her 2006 song Cast Away the Clouds, and then you might find yourself going down a very pleasant Rose Melburg rabbit hole.
Yeah. So at Softies, what'd you call them? Tween?
I didn't call them anything. Twee pop.
Twee?
Twee. Twee.
Twee pop.
And and to me, because it goes back. It could be the Everly Brothers' "Bye Bye Love." It could be Simon and Garfunkel. The literal, like if you're just the literal sound of two people singing harmonies and playing a guitar. That's what it's kind of sounds like. It sounds a little bit like the White Stripes' "We Are Going to Be Friends," a very cute song. So that's what the twee pop genre kind of sounds like to me.
See, I would have classified these as like sad girl music. I mean, it was just like
I could see where it would be on the
emotionally just
sad.
Just a couple of wrecked people just harmonizing.
I know, but that can make for some great music.
Didn't, but could.
I think I like them better than you, but also it's a no. I'm a no on it.
Yeah.
But
I was so excited.
They are not the. Yeah.
I was so excited when I read all these reviews, and it sounded so intriguing, and I thought it'd be everything that we would like in music, and it wasn't.
I will say it would, like if they were playing at a coffee shop down the road, I wouldn't mind hearing them. They were
I would.
They weren't.
I'd go.
I wasn't tortured by it as to the degree that you.
No, and it wasn't torture. It was all very pleasant. It was very.
It's just not number 2 on the best albums of the year.
No, the songs all kind of just blended together. It was the same kind of themes, and which isn't necessarily bad.
If you like that sort of a thing.
Yeah, it just wasn't my jam, and it was kind of disappointed.
Well, we like the Softies as people and human beings.
Right.
I think our main complaint is with the ranking of the album. Really.
Yeah. The other kind of music that is new music that I kind of want to talk about is and I don't know how to pronounce the name. And
Paul Simonon.
Yeah, no, that I get to butcher one every show, and this will be the one I'll butcher. It's Ben. I'm going to pronounce it Weller, but it's
spelled with a K.
Kweller.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm just going to go Ben Weller and say the K is quiet.
Ben, if you're out there and you'd like to reach out to us for the correct pronunciation of your name,
Kweller.
Well, yeah,
Kweller?
sure.
Kweller.
I think people can at least look it up if they know how to spell it.
Right.
Or maybe our social media people will link it.
There's a song out. Was
Chauncey just made a joke.
Right. Yes. There's a song out by Ben called "Optimistic," brand new.
Okay.
Yeah, it was just released. He has an album coming out called "The Cover of Mirrors." It's going to be released in May of 2025. And I very much enjoyed listening to this song, and I would recommend it to you to listen to. Not dropping the softies on you, but I think this is an actually good rock and roll song. And then that led me down a rabbit hole of who is Ben Weller and why haven't I heard of him and where's he from. And
I'm nodding my head, but I forget we're actually on a podcast.
Yeah.
So yes, go on.
All right, there's video being taken. But he had a minor hit with a band called Radish back in 1977 when he would have been 16 years old.
Almost Van Morrison-like.
And there's a video of his hit "Little Pink Stars," and I made you go watch this video.
Yes.
And talk about somebody that like hero worshipped Kurt Cobain and Nirvana.
Clearly, influence. It wouldn't be hard to figure out what his musical influences are.
No. But it's actually, even that song is really good for a 16-year-old.
Yes.
In a very young band, and the video looking remarkably like Nirvana aside, it's a good song. Seems like a decent production, amazing from a 16-year-old kid, and his music has obviously matured a little bit, and but I very much enjoyed this. And so you watched the video?
I did watch the video.
Yeah.
No, I see the same thing you're saying. Yeah.
So so I would say Optimistic by Ben Weller or Kweller or however you want to pronounce it is worth giving it a spin. You have anything to?
Well, yeah. I finally got to see Wicked in the theaters, in the movie theater. Not the theater, but the theater. I went to the theater to see it. And
the movie picture shows?
Yeah, it was terrific. I loved it. I loved the original on stage, and they did a great job with it in the movies. And it was a goal of mine to go see a movie in the theater. I haven't done that in a while, and I thoroughly enjoyed it.
And I think I commented the last time we talked about this that the movie does a much better job of explaining the story.
Right, they took 2.5 hours to just do the first act, the first half of it. So it definitely filled in a lot of the gaps of the story that maybe were missing on stage. And then I found the Violent Femmes concert. We had seen them at Ravinia, and it turns out they made a concert video of that with the Milwaukee Symphony Orchestra. And it's essentially the same show we watched. Also the same shout-outs, but to a different city. So I feel a little used as far as that goes. But that's a great, great concert. It's one of my favorite concerts of the summer, as we talked about. And it's awesome that it's on video. And you can watch on YouTube now if you like. But the Violent Femmes...
They're from Milwaukee, aren't they?
Yes, they are.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the Violent Femmes with the Milwaukee Symphony Orchestra is for sure a pick to click.
So I was one of the best shows I've ever saw. It was last summer at Ravinia,
right,
when they were playing with the Chicago Symphony.
Yes, not the Chicago Symphony Orchestra, but the Chicago Pops, I believe, is the name of the group. There are still the name of
subgenres of symphonies.
It's just not that. No, it's a different band. It's a different group of people. But that particular group of people is full of monster musicians, and a lot of them are members of the CSO or Lyric or Opera or the Ravinia Festival. So these are first call symphonic musicians playing with this band that we got to see.
So,
and if you were wondering, by the way, how the Violent Femmes and a symphony orchestra would mesh together, the answer is spectacularly.
And the symphony orchestra seems to have a great time.
Yes, they embrace their inner punk.
Yeah.
They got to let loose a little bit.
So the Violent Femmes, there's a lot of songs you would know. That first album they had is amazing, but I think musically, seeing them in person, there was a couple of things that just jumped out at me. Is he a bass player? Is that?
Yeah, it's a bass. It's a acoustic bass, is I think essentially what it is. And I apologize, I don't have the full knowledge of this, but it's you think of bass players as having an electric bass, or possibly playing an upright bass.
Sure.
So he's playing an acoustic bass. If you see pictures of it, it's
wild.
It's wild. So on the Milwaukee Symphony one, he's playing a normal looking instrument. The one he was using at Ravinia had like a weird shape to it. It had like holes cut out. It did not look like a normal guitar, but it's an acoustic bass guitar.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Speaking of weird instruments at that show, they have a horn thingy.
It was a horn thingy.
Contrabass
saxophone.
A who?
It's a big saxophone. A really, really, really big saxophone.
It's got to be 6 feet tall.
It's more. I think more than that, because it's taller than the performer. The performer has to sit in a chair to play it, and the piping is above his head and everything. So it makes a very low sound. It's a very uncommon instrument. You don't see it very often. It's not commonly used, even a bass saxophone. So if you go see a jazz band, like a normal, say, 1950s, let's call them a swing band for you, you would see 3 different saxophones most likely. You
Well,
see an alto
Clarence-
sax, a tenor sax, a baritone sax.
Clarence Clemens
Ten-
always had kind of lined up. his
Right, and he would
saxophone.
perhaps play those. Yeah, and they come in different sizes,
Yep,
and
yeah,
the smaller
yeah.
they are, the higher they sound. So the bigger they are, the lower they sound.
Kind of
It's
goes.
It's physics.
Yeah.
Can't do anything about it. So you get to the bari sax, which is sort of the most common of the lower instrument. Most of the time it stops there. There is such a thing as a bass sax, which is bigger than a baritone sax.
Mm-hmm.
And then a contrabass sax was what we saw. And I believe the only other time, well, that's not true. Wish I knew you were bringing this up. But there's a jazz musician from like the 70s who played it very commonly, whose name
Chuck Mangione?
No, whose name escapes me right now. And also I think the Vampire Weekend currently I think uses one on stage. So it definitely has a novelty factor to it, but it's a sweet instrument.
I totally thought it was a gimmick. I didn't think anybody would actually play it.
Yeah.
I thought it was just a prop.
No.
Somebody built like a giant, ear of corn or something that they had on stage.
Oh, no, it's a real instrument.
And then somebody started playing it, and I was just like, whoa. So that was my first experience seeing one up front, and kind of cool.
And actually, I think the first time I've seen one in person, other than perhaps in a museum, I don't think I've ever seen anybody play one live.
Yeah.
I have one more. What I'm listening to. Are we there yet?
Yeah, sure. Go for it.
Ringo Starr released a new album.
Get out.
Yeah, it's called Look Up. And
with his All Stars, or
no, it's not the All Stars. It's a album of country originals. Yeah, it's his second album of country originals. Now, I don't know if you know this, but he really just wanted to be a country star. His dream in 1962 was to be a country musician. He failed. So he failed. Yeah, if anybody failed up, he's the one. But so he has a real passion for this music. Beatles music and his music is informed quite a bit by country music. So it's a legitimate foray into the realm of country music. Some names, he got some people to collaborate with him on it. You might recognize the name Billy Strings, plays on several albums, several songs. Alison Krauss is playing on at least one song. Molly Tuttle is playing on it. It's a legit, serious country album put out by Ringo Starr.
Well, speaking of the Beatles,
yes,
I actually wanted to get your feedback and opinion on this. There's a new box set the Beatles released.
Okay.
Called 1964 U.S. albums in mono.
Oh, okay. Because their albums were released separately. Like the British albums and the American albums were kind of different. They would record their albums for the British audience, but then the people that when they wanted to release them in America, they would change things around. They would change track orders or maybe include songs or not include songs, because apparently the American audience is different from the British audience.
Can you explain to me what the in mono means?
Mono, yeah. Well, you have stereo and mono. So stereo, it's tracks. So it's originally, if you imagine just having, I guess the easiest way to explain it was if you had a live band and you put one mic in front of them and you would get the sound of one thing. It's one track. It's one track of sound.
All right.
Okay, and then the early music, that's all they had. Really, there was only the ability to do mono, but stereo is 2 tracks. Okay, so like we have 2 different microphones.
So explain what an 8-track is.
It does. It actually does. So and it would right, and you would have on an 8-track, you would have 4 tracks. We're talking about things that, well, I guess if you're listening to this podcast, you probably know what an 8-track is.
Right.
But that's why you would flip it over, because there would be an 8-track is very thick.
Yeah. Yep.
So you can literally visualize like 4 parts of tape, and each part of tape would have a different recording on it, and when you put those 4 recordings together, it creates an entire sound.
Right.
But when it ran out, you would flip it over, and it would read the other 4 tracks. So you were listening to a 4-track recording.
I'm actually learning something.
Yeah.
In this podcast. See, education.
There you go. So, but anyway, stereo, and some of the early Beatles, we can go. That's going to be a whole nother podcast, of course, because of their. You go forever on their innovations in recording, but they were one of the first bands to really try to create stereo sound, and they did it with 2 mono tracks. And it was kind of crude. So some of their earlier stereo recordings were really just mono, and you could turn the balance knob on your stereo and only hear one part of the song.
Mm-hmm.
But it was an effort to create the stereo sound. So these are mono tracks. Some people, those albums were originally released in mono. That's, if you're a purist, that's how you want to listen to these tracks. That's how they first came out. But over time, they've been reissued as stereo, and some people just want to hear it how it was intended to be, and so some people may be willing to buy that.
So I think it's like $250.
It's a lot. Yeah, it's for collectors probably.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I
So
have a similar box from previous on CD that has. I'm pretty sure I already own that in a different format, but it has all the stereo and mono recordings
On sale for $287.
Yeah.
Regularly $320 for 8 albums.
Right.
8 LPs. All right. Well, that I don't think I will be investing in that.
I won't, but I think, you know.
It's out there. It lives in the wild.
Yes.
Well, I think we should probably move on. Looking at time here,
Okay.
so we'll come back with Act 3.
This episode of Two Fat Guys in an Album is brought to you by Smidge Films. If you're looking to bring your ideas to life with some cool cinematic work, Smidge Films has you covered. From brand stories to promos, we'll help you tell your story in a way that really sticks. Check us out and see what we can do for you.
The final part of each episode of Two Fat Guys in an Album is we talk about a hidden gem, something that one of us recommends that may have been an overlooked piece of music or something that really didn't get heavily recognized or at least escaped me. And this is an album that I think is just phenomenal, and to say it was overlooked is probably a misnomer, because it did get highly recognized when it was released. But the album is The Balcony, and it's by Catfish and the Bottlemen. It was released in 2014. Last year, a 10th anniversary edition came out, so it was kind of brought back into the forefront.
Anthony Braxton. I just remembered the jazz musician that plays this. It's Anthony Braxton.
Wow.
Go on.
It's like recording with a goldfish. All right. So anywho, this whole album is worth kind of giving a spin, and it actually ties very well to the topic today, because the lead singer is Van McCann, and the Van, part of his name is actually a nickname that is because his favorite singer happens to be Van Morrison.
So Catfish and the Bottlemen were influenced by Van Morrison.
They
what I'm
were.
hearing. Yeah.
They were. And the other thing it kind of ties to is if the Softies were sad girl music,
Mm-hmm.
the lyrics here, this music is kind of angry boy music. It's a lot of that kind of angry boy.
Couldn't you say
angst
that about
kind
all post-punk music?
maybe. But I love the energy of this, and I don't even know. So the lyrically, it's a lot of angry kind of stuff, issues, and angst and whatever. But energy-wise,
Yes.
oh my God, it's so kind of up-tempo, high energy.
Yes.
I would love to just go see this band, sit on the side, and watch the drummer. I'm not sure if you're allowed to say this about a drummer, but this is the happiest drumming. You can actually hear the happiness as he pounds away.
Okay.
The drummer's name
I
is...
think he'd be happy to know that he evoked a specific response.
So it's like, one guy standing in front of the microphone crying, where his buddy's sitting behind him having just this great time pounding away on the drum.
Sure.
He's
a drummer. He's probably not paying attention to the lyrics anyways.
Maybe. The drummer's name, it's worth the shout out, is named Bob Hall. I don't think he's with the band anymore. But, oh my God, this to me, this is worth listening to. Have you?
So I actually stumbled upon Catfish and the Bottlemen live. I saw them live in 2017. They opened up for Green Day at Wrigley Field. No. And they, and again, this is a live concert, and they were the opening band. And I still haven't completely figured this out, why opening bands always sound worse than the headliner.
That's true.
I'm almost positive there's something written in the contract that the headliner says you may not sound better than us.
Like they're only in mono?
Something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. It could be. Yeah. So they sounded sort of loud to my old man ears at the time. They were, and I was just I had not heard of them, so I was just giving them the opening act brush off at the moment.
Sure.
But I was at the concert with my daughter, and she was super excited to hear them because she was familiar with the music and everything. Yeah, I gave the album a listen, and it's actually one that's grown on me. I was listening to, I was reading a review, just a particular music reviewer in other contexts. But what she said was she always listens to something 3 times at least, because the first time it often doesn't sound good, and that's okay, because it might mean that the band's doing something new or something that you're not familiar with, and that may be disorienting to you. So just because you might not like it the first time, don't dismiss it. You just have to get acclimated to it. And so the first time I listened to them, they didn't stand out to me as much. The second time I listened to them, I started liking them better. And I liked the album better after multiple listenings. Because then I started having the feeling like, oh, I've heard that song before. I like that song. But it did make me think that maybe I had heard this music before way back in 2014, and it just was like buried deep. And I just heard the song because these songs really started to sound more familiar to me after 2 or 3 listenings. So I'm curious, just in your world of your ranking of albums, I know we're not ranking these necessarily, but just as an extension of our earlier discussion about perfect albums, definitely not a perfect album, but it's one that's worth talking about, obviously, to you, unlike the Softies.
Which we talked about.
Yeah, but
longer.
how would you characterize this album in terms of, if you were putting this up against a classic album, I guess is what I'm trying to get at.
I don't know.
Just putting it in context, I think.
Right. So I think there's 3 really good songs on this album that are worth listening to. The style is to me, I love like the drummer's enemy, energy. So if, I was going to recommend to if somebody's unfamiliar with this album, try listening to like Kathleen or Cocoon.
Right. I think Kathleen might be the one that was on the radio.
Yeah. So try listening to those songs. Give those a listen. You may understand what I'm saying about the drummer. I just think this is just a solid work and a band that it sound like that they kind of flew apart and they're not really a band anymore. There's maybe the lead singer left.
Right.
Which is a shame because I think musically it's a solid group.
I think they had a really good run though.
Yeah, well, it's definitely an album they could have lived off of for a long time. It's just kind of a solid sort of just rock and roll, decent lyrics, quality singer.
Like a 7?
A solid 6 anyways.
Okay. So 6 is worth listening to. This is like, is it?
Yeah, it's
6.
You know, so
6 is worth your time.
So you talked about having this playlist with like 4,500 songs.
Yes.
I have a playlist that I curate.
Yes, you do.
And so it's probably 150 songs, and I move songs in and out
Right.
as I kind of get tired or don't want to hear that one anymore or find something new.
Right.
And so I very much I lovingly curate this playlist.
It's like a tulip.
And you know, there's several songs here that once I kind of revisited this album that I put back into rotation. It was in Kathleen and Cocoon.
But they will eventually go out of rotation.
They probably will.
Okay.
You know, as I kind of
All right,
move on or find other things.
Yeah, just trying to understand how.
But I think, you know, if people are unfamiliar with the band and the album, that it's worth taking the time to listen to this music.
Excellent.
So
And actually, that's something I'd encourage. Like, I feel like that's part of what the podcast aspires to is exposing new music. Let's get out of comfort zones and let's check out a band that we haven't heard from or revisit something that maybe we forgot.
Well, for people of our age and the albums and the music and the concerts we saw in our teens and 20s and early 30s, you know, which are, you know, I mean, you know, who didn't we see, right? I mean,
Right, a lot of classic,
the
well-known.
Stones,
Yes.
and, you know, the Grateful Dead.
Actually, I've never seen the Stones, but go on.
I've seen the Stones a couple times. The Who.
Yes. We'll tell that story another day.
We will not. So, you know, but we've continued to enjoy live music, and we've gone to see. We've continued.
Right. I
see
feel like
this.
not like it's, oh my gosh, the Stones, or well, they are still around, but
Yeah.
you know, this band's still around, but I still want to go see something today.
And I
enjoy it.
like music at smaller venues.
Yes.
So some of these smaller bands, and I'm open to good music, whether it was made 50 years ago or being made today. Yeah. All right.
Might you
boy.
even like good music regardless of genre?
Yes, but I like to put it into its genre.
Okay.
All right.
Fair enough.
Yeah. So I think that brings us to the close to episode number 2 here, where we talked about the legendary album Moondance by Van Morrison.
You didn't ask me where I rank it, I don't think. Sorry, I know we're closing. But I'm just telling you, top 10 for sure, maybe top 5. For me, Moondance. Yeah,
right?
I've got it way up there.
Wow, that's not even his best album.
No, I realize
right.
that. But
Okay.
continue. We're out
So
of
do you
time.
have the other albums, his other albums above that?
This is my favorite
All right.
Van Morrison album.
Okay. So now this draws us to the conclusion of episode 2, Moondance by Van Morrison. We have some thank yous. We'd like to thank our director and production team from Smidge Films, our PR team from LR Media. Our sponsors this week, I think, is still Your Home Group. And you can now find us. You can now find us on Instagram. You can listen to this podcast on Spotify or on Apple Music.
Wherever you consume podcasts, I believe we are aspiring to that.
We're on Podbean now as well. You can find us on YouTube. And next week we're going to do episode 3 will be Supertramp's Breakfast in America.
Excellent.
So, I'm Fat Guy 1.
Fat Guy 2.
Thank you, and we'll talk to you next week.
This is where you must respect my maestro of musicness.
What?
Skiffle is important.
Yeah.
Really important. The fact that you don't know anything about it does not make it less important.
You couldn't even identify swing when you were listening to it. Oh you just all right.
Cattle prod. Could we get cattle prod? Like when he says something stupid, could I have a cattle prod to just poke him with?